the translation of the Quran and anything they are teaching should not be uh, against the teaching or the beliefs of the Islam. So they were not taking at that time the University of Al Qarain was not taking just the local student there. That was an international affairs. So in the time of famous Abbasi universities of Baghdad, uh, even before this university, there was a in Baghdad there was a university which was teaching medicine, pharmacology, engineering, astronomy, and other subjects. So students were coming from the Persia, from Syria, from India, and we all know, we all heard the name of Jamiatul Al Azhar in Egypt, in Cairo, and it is still very famous university. Uh, so that university was founded by the Muslims to look after the education, the modern education, and to give the skills to the Muslims to go and teach the other humanity about the science and the knowledge of Islam. In the 17th century, we found in ancient scriptures by Ibn Sina, who is known as a father of the medicine. We'll talk about him in the next week in details about his achievement. So he was also one of the teachers in those universities. So going back to the Al Qarawin Mosque, the student, they don't have to pay the fees. It was all free. And like today, we have to go. If you're going to a university, you need to pay a fee. If you can't pay the fee, then you have to get the loan with interest, and for the next 20 years of your life, you have to repay that student loan. But at that time, the students, the education, the university education was free. And not just free, they were given the monetary allowances for the food and accommodation. All this was made possible by the endowments from the royal families. The student, they live in the residential complexes or the hostels, which was consist of a 2 and 3 story buildings, and there was hundreds of students living in those buildings. And from that we have now the concept of the madaris in every part of the world, where the students, they are studying and they are staying in the student accommodations in those madaris. In in Tunisia, Al Zaytuna Mosque, uh, there's we found the manuscripts on grammar, logic, documentation, etiquettes of research, cosmology, arithmetic, geometry, minerals, and vocational training. The teaching was studied in a group known as an halqa, and if there are more than one halqa, it's called halqatul ilm, which we use nowadays as well in the religious gathering. Make a halqa. So it is basically like a semicircle formed in front of the teacher, and the students sit in front of the teachers. So if there is a visiting scholar or visiting teacher coming to give his lectures, they're usually allowed to sit beside the lecturer because of the mark, because of the respect. And in many halqas, a very special section was always reserved for the visitors. The mosque of Amr near Cairo had more than 40 halqas at the same point. And in the chief mosque of Cairo, there were 120 halqas. There was a very difficult courses at that time, which was medicine, and it was under the Department of Medicine, and that was having a hard and a long examination. Anyone less than a pass meant that they could not practice medicine, and unless and until they achieve a certain grade, they cannot practice the medicine, and they're pronounced as incompetent. The students of law, they go through an undergraduate training, so they're not just reading and giving exam. They were going an undergraduate training as well. So at the end, if they are successful, then they have to apply to find a what you call as a barrister nowadays, but at that time there was a master of law, and if the master of law accepted that student, then the student becomes as a fellow. Only then those graduate students, they can practice the law with their master. And at that time there was no end time, like you have to do 4 years, 2 years or something with your fellow as a fellow. It could take up to 20 years before they acquire their own professional chair. The law student, they need to get a certificate of authorization and a formal license before practicing. These certificates known as the ijazah, which is now we known as a degree or a certificate. The first appeared in the University of Paris, degrees in Europe, in Paris, in 1231. There was the first degree course introduced in Paris. So the Muslim, they institutionalized higher level education. There was an entrance exam, there were final exams, there were degree exams, there were study circles, there were opportunities available for international students, there were scholarships given to the poor students, and there were so many grants given to the people, so they can just focus on the study and they do not have to worry about anything else. So that's how the Muslim, they ruled the world at that time. I was talking about the library. I just touched based on it. I'm just gonna do a little bit more discussion into the libraries. What happened in Baghdad and in Basra, which was the capital of the Muslim Empire, of the Abbasi Khalifa at that time? There was hundreds and thousands of books, and all these libraries, they were looked after by the government. And that was like 1,000 years ago, before there was any sign of libraries or formal education found in the Europe. So in the 8th century, at the time of Abbasi Khalifa Al-Ma'mun al-Rashid, the Muslims, they started producing books because they know how to make paper, and because they were greatly encouraged to record all their experiments. So not like the church of that time. If there is any scientific achievement or scientific proof or a scientific theory, the church comes after them. But in the Islam, in the Muslim rule, they were encouraged to record all their experiment in the form of the books. So all these books, they were put into the library, and that library used to call the Khazain of knowledge, the treasure of knowledge. So before the like I said, before doing any research in any other field, they have to have the in-depth knowledge about the Quran, and nothing should go against the teaching or the beliefs of the Islam. So, Hazrat Umar's daughter, Hafsa Raziyallahu an, she made the arrangement of the verses in the chapter or surahs, and the location of each chapter was personally checked and revised by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. So several copy existed, but most of these contain personal explanatory note by their owners. So all these copies need to be collected, produced, and to produce a single standard copy without additional comment, and that was also checked against the original version of Hafsa Raziyallahu ta'ala anha. This copy of the Quran was produced by Hazrat Usman ibn Affan Raziyallahu ta'ala an, the third Khalifa, the third Caliph of Islam. And he led to the standardization of reading and writing, and the styles made it easier to spread. Copy of this 1400-year-old Usmani manuscript of Quran are still available in major libraries of the world. And the present copy of the Quran is an authentic duplication of this original 7th century manuscript. In Aleppo in Syria, they had the largest and the oldest library called Al-Safia. It's the city grand mosque by the Umayyad Khalifas at the time of them, with a collection of 10,000 volumes. That was the city most famous for her ruler and the prince Saif al-Dawla. It is the oldest and the largest library, but the library at Zaytuna in Tunisia, it was possibly the richest of the all, meaning that the collection in that library was more than in the Syria, Al-Safia. So there were 100,000 volumes of just one. Like if it's a chemistry, there are 100,000 of books or volumes available in each language. So there was a translation process going on. There was a research process going on. There was a previous research by the non-Muslim scientists of the theory. They were translated into the Arabic, and they were given to the students to carry out the research based on their theories. So, and then those public libraries were open to the public, so it's not just a student, but anyone who want to read and study, they can come to the library and borrow the books and then return it. And like I said before, the Mongol, they just decimated Baghdad in 1258. It had 36 libraries and over 100 book dealers, and some of them who are publisher and employing a copy of the copyist or the publisher. All those libraries were destroyed because the Mongols, they were not very they were just not very civilized, I would say. So when the Muslim rule ended in Indonesia, the Christian at that time in the Spain, they were more civilized because they were living alongside with the Muslim for 700 to 800 years. So instead of burning those libraries, they got their books and translated into their languages, in Latin, in English now, in Spanish, and based on their work, they carried out the research, and they are there because of those books. If the Mongols, they have saved those library or have done some research, they might still be ruling the world. So the Sultan of Bukhara, he used to visit in the library. He was a sultan, and he used to come and take the books from the library. Al-Jahiz in 8th century, a Muslim philosopher and a man of literature, he returned to his home in Basra after spending more than 50 years in Baghdad. And what he was doing, he was studying and writing about 200 books. 50 years it took him. This includes a 7-volume book of animals, which had the observation on the social organization of ants, communication between the animals, and the effects of diet and the environment at that time. Now we watch National Geographic or Blue Planet on BBC and things like that. But that was the first research done by Al-Jahiz in 8th century. And that book still exists and it's been translated in many other languages of the world. The other book he wrote was The Art of Keeping One's Mouth Shut. How to keep quiet, basically. And Against the Civil Servant. He died an appropriate death in his private library in 868 at the age of 92, when a pile of books fell on him. Wow, that's amazing. Never heard someone spend so much time, devoted his life in writing and spreading knowledge, and then finally died in the place where he loved no most, in the library. Like libraries today, 1,000 years ago, they were highly ordered, with both public and private library having book classification system and accurate cataloging to help the readers. It wasn't just like you got the book and put it in the shelf. No, it was like properly labeled, organized like we have it now. They were like the grand affair in Shiraz in Iran in 10th century. They were a complex which is described by the medieval historian Al-Muqaddasi. The buildings surrounded by the gardens, the lakes and the waters, topped with domes and comprised an upper and lower story with a total of 360 rooms. And each department there was a catalog placed on a shelf, and the rooms were furnished with the carpet. That was like a fully furnished, well-equipped library in Iran. Some libraries, like those in Shiraz, Qurtuba, and Cairo, were in buildings separate from the mosque. Because of their size, they were growing, so they were not in the mosque anymore. They were building beside of the mosque because of the size and the requirement of the people. In 1050, the book of collection from Al-Azhar Library in Cairo had more than 120,000 volumes recorded in a 60-volume catalog, totaling about 3,500 pages. Wow. So the collection of Al-Azhar Library had more than 120,000 volumes, which were recorded in a 60-volume catalog, and the totaling about 3,500 pages in the year 1050. In Spain, the catalog for the works in Al-Hakim's library was alleged to have consisted of 44 volumes. I remember the guys, the paper were invented, but they were writing. There was no printing press at that time, so they were writing these amount of books, these number of pages. So the books, like I said, it was put it in the shelf according to their catalog, according to the types, according to the discipline. People can borrow the books from the libraries, and then after some time they have to return it. If they don't return it, they will be sent a reminder. A person will go from the library, or they will write a letter to that member of the public to return the book. Same thing still followed after more than 1,000 years, We still have the same library system which was invented by the Muslim. So the librarians, they were also appointed to take charge, and this was an honored position at that time. So they were the custodians of the library, the guardians, and the protector of knowledge. So they were treated as an utmost respect at that time. And nowadays we don't even realize the importance and the hard work all the librarians do around the world. We just think they just issue the book and we can return the books to them. But at the Muslim medieval time, that position was something which is very, very honored. The management of the Almohad dynasty, the rulers in the North Africa in 12th and 13th century, was of one of the most privileged and state positions. So in the other parts of the Muslim countries at that time, they were also a very noble and honored position, but especially in the North Africa during the time of Almohad dynasty, it was the most privileged state position awarded by the Sultan